Hi there, this is Justin. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to track your user onboarding flow. This video is going to be most useful for analysts that are working for software businesses that have an application where users, either B2C or B2B, go through some form of onboarding within the application. So the first step in the process is to actually map out the onboarding flow. So what you see on your screen in front of you, I created this diagram in Lucidchart. This is an example of a typical onboarding flow. It starts out with the user actually signing up to the service. And you might be wondering, why is there two steps here? Well, some applications actually force you to confirm your email address, for example, or go through multiple steps as part of the sign up. So you might want to include those right in the beginning of your funnel. So I should have mentioned, when you're mapping out the onboarding flow, you want to break it up into a funnel. That way we can track each step along the way. So in this example, right, there's two steps to the sign up. So someone, say, fills out a form on the website, they enter their email address, they're sent an email, ask them to confirm their email address. Once they've done that, they've completed the signing up process. After that, they're taken to the first screen in onboarding. I'm sure you've seen this yourself. You sign up to a service, they ask you to provide some information, what is your role, your first name, last name, etc. And in this example, we've got 4 distinct screens as part of the onboarding. After the onboarding's done, usually the user will be taken into the application, to some form of dashboard or to a feature that they need to now enable, etc. So now that we've got our funnel, it's important to understand we can track two pieces of information between each step. We can track the number of people that move from the previous step to the next step, right? So if we had 100 people signed up, how many of those 100 completed the sign up? And then out of the people that got to this step in the funnel, how many got to the next step, etc. Right? So we can track the number of people or businesses, right? If you're B2B, and then we have the conversion rate. So as an example, we had 100 people that signed up, 90 of them completed the sign up process. There would be a conversion rate between step 1 and step 2 in our funnel of 90%, right? And what we want to understand as analysts, like what's the percentage of users that get all the way through, right? And the reason we track each step is it allows us to determine if we have any problems in the flow. If a lot of users are, for example, dropping off in this step, in the third screen, then we might want to try and understand what's going on there. Is there a lot of friction? Maybe there's a bug in our application that's preventing users from moving through. And that can be very useful, because if a lot of people are dropping off very early on in the life cycle, then it's going to be difficult for the business to grow and actually make money. So that's fundamentally the starting point, right? We map out our funnel and we want to track number of people that go through and the percentage. So what data exactly do we need to be able to determine this? Well, there's kind of different ways that businesses handle this, but the best way would be to generate an event at each step of the way, right? So when someone signs up to the application, typically, in every case, they're going to be that user will be created in the database. So that would be our first data point, right? Someone signs up, we have some information. Typically, they have to enter in a username and password, or an email address and a password. And when that's saved, if done correctly, right, we have a timestamp saved of when that user signed up. So we'll have a row added to our database, to a table in our database with some basic information at this point. We have typically an ID that's generated automatically by the application, by the backend code, and we'll have typically some kind of identifier like an email address, uh, and we can use that to answer the first step, right? So we can count those rows. That tells us how many people signed up. That's going to be very straightforward, and you won't have problems with that. But every additional step in the process, some applications aren't actually saving this information. So let me help you out by explaining how this should be done. Completed signed up, and this would also typically be recorded in the database because we need some kind of indicator that the user has confirmed the email address, or the system is not going to accept them, right? That's why we have it. We have it as a way to prevent spam users from signing up and using the application. So these two steps that I have in green here will typically be covered, not typically, would be covered, in the application database. So we don't have a problem there. Then in terms of the onboarding, if we want to record, if we want to know exactly when a user reaches each of these screens, we need to have some form of data being generated. So there's a tool that I like to recommend called Segment, which is a really great tool, especially for early stage SaaS that need to record event data. So Segment can be the service that you integrate with in your application that you can then write code that generates events that are being sent to Segment. And then Segment can be connected to, you can see many destinations, including a data warehouse, and then you can just move that data into the data warehouse and use that for your analysis, your analyses, I should say. So each time a user hits a specific screen, you could trigger a page view or a screen view event using Segment that tells us, okay, this specific user saw this specific screen. Then when they click next or did whatever they needed and they get to the second screen, we generate another event. And this way we can basically, when working with our data, look for those specific events. And if they happen, if we find them for the specific user, right, then we know that they got to that screen. So we need to generate some kind of data here, and ideally you want the event data because you want the timestamp of when the user got to that specific screen. So I hope that's clear. In some cases, an application, the developers of an application might save this in the database, which is also fine, especially if they do it so that it's recorded like an event. So we have a timestamp, we know which user triggered it, etc., then that's fine. The incorrect way would be some form of Boolean, or another, saved as some string or something, where we just haven't indicated they got to the screen, but we don't know when they did it. We want to have both, just to allow us to answer questions like how quickly does it take a user to complete the onboarding, or if a user came back 3 days after sign up and complete onboarding. We'd want to know these things, and we can't if there's no timestamps being saved. So assuming, we implement something like Segment, or our developers save us, event data in the database, and we have an event every time each of these screens are viewed, then we're good to go. Once we have that data, the next step in the process would be to go ahead and build essentially a cohort-based report. And I've got an example here based on the funnel above. I just obviously made up these numbers. I didn't even check if the numbers at the bottom here are matching the top. It's not important. You'll see what this is all about in a second. So these are cohort-based reports, and what does that mean? It means that each row represents a specific cohort of user. So I should actually write here to make it a bit clearer. This is sign up week. Of course, you could do this on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. I'm just using the last 2 weeks as an example. And we then have a column for every step in our funnel. Okay, so step one, user signs up, completed sign up, onboarding step 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Right? So if we take week the 25th, this week, just as an example, we have 600 users signed up, 590 of the 600 completed the sign up, 589 got to step 1, etc., etc. Right? So this way we can see the first option here, which is the actual number of people going through the funnel. So here we've got 600 as a starting point, and all the numbers that follow are the same 600. So, not to get, go down the rabbit hole too much, but in order to build this out, you will need to take each user that we care about, right? And we need an indicator or an event, as I mentioned before, for that user for each step. So it's a pretty robust data model that would need to be built, because we need the timestamps, or rather we need an indicator for each user for each step. Okay. Once we've done that, we can then build out these tables. So the first version of the table is just looking at the numerical values, like how many people got to each step out of a specific cohort. And I'll explain why we use this method in a second. Now, why do we want to look at the number of people? The main reason is we just want to determine that our starting point has enough users for us to actually see significance. So in this example, I've got 600, that's plenty. But imagine we only had 10 users that signed up in the week. It's very difficult to determine if we have problems in our funnel with only 10 people, right? You're not going to really have statistical significance, and you're not going to be able to learn much. So we want to look at the absolute number just to make sure we have enough that's actually coming through the funnel to allow us to actually learn something. Now, this is kind of useful to an extent. It's just good to understand how many people are getting to the end in absolute terms. But by far the more useful version of this would be the percentage of total, right? So I've got to 600, but this is effectively 100%, right? Because that's our starting point. So we start with 100%, and then we want to see how many people get to the end. And we can see the percentages all the way through, right? So in other words, out of all the users that signed up in the week of the 25th of August, 87% of them got to step 2 of the onboarding. And 60% of them completed. Okay, it also allows us to now see the drop-offs. So in this example, right, we start with 100%, almost everyone completes a sign up, we only lose 2% of the users. The next step, we lose basically 1%. So from sign up all the way to onboarding, step 1, we only lose 3 to 4% of users, which is great. Then the drop-offs start to go, get bigger, right? So from step 1 to step 2, we lose around 10%. In this case, 11%, then 12%. Then from step 3 to step 4, there's very small drop-offs, right? So that's great. But then from step 4 to completed, we have a big drop-off, right? Another 12% we lose here. So at the end of the day, from beginning to end, we're losing around 40%. 40% in this week, 42%. And the main reason we want to use a cohort approach is it allows us to track over time how we're improving. So we can just scan downwards to determine how things are doing. Now, you're obviously going to have variance, so the numbers will shift here and there. By the way, depending on how you're doing your marketing, if you're very consistent in your marketing, the numbers will be a lot more consistent. But if you all of a sudden bring in a whole bunch of users from a different channel or quality, then the numbers will obviously move in that given week. So let's just say over the next 6 weeks, the company is very, very focused on improving, onboarding step 4, right? Meaning that we want to get more people to complete. This is a great way that we can track this, because if they're doing a good job, then hopefully we'll see an improvement from 58, 60%. Hopefully we'll see 62, 64, 70%, depending how good of a job they do. Another thing this report does, which is really good, it allows us to know exactly where to focus. So as I mentioned before, right, we only lose 3% between sign up and onboarding, step one. So we don't have to worry about focusing any attention on those steps, because those are very small gains if we can improve them. So, it really helps align focus within the company, within R&D, within product, by using this methodology of a cohort-based conversion, funnel report. So yeah, that's it. I hope this was clear. If you have any questions on this topic, please feel free to let me know in the comments. I enjoy engaging and answering questions in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, you would like more of them, please consider hitting the like button and clicking the subscribe button. The channel's growing every week, which is great to see. And yeah, that's it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.